We're a couple minutes past the official time. Thank you all for being here at 5 o'clock. Most of us, if there's anybody that's fishing, especially fly fishing, that doesn't know who the heck Fishy Fullum is, we need to talk to him. Anyway, Fishy is our speaker for tonight, and he has written a tremendous number of books and demonstrates practically every place where fly tyers go on the whole doggone planet, or at least the North American plate. And he will introduce himself on that standpoint, and he's got he's going to be demonstrating some of his unique fishing fly patterns. And then if you will stay for our meeting, he has a new presentation for the meeting as well that I've talked about, and I'm looking forward to it very much. So without further baloney, Mr. Fullum.
Thank you, sir. All right, as usual, you know that I can tie very traditional flies. I tied commercially with my dear wife for what, 10 years, honey, or something like that? So we can tie real flies, but I have more fun tying fishy flies, which are, who knows what, fingernails, some really nice stuff to use. I'm going to do one that's actually very simple. I start out with, where's the thin one? Yeah. With a piece out of a white meat tray. You get the little trays with varieties of cold cuts on them or meat of some kind, right? I tried the yellow, it doesn't work. It's not a good looking bug. There's a pink one that, believe it or not, when you put the piping over it, looks pretty good. And the black one is kind of neat if you put the piping over it, because you really don't see the fly, but when it moves, it sparkles, it has more sparkle to it because of the background. So what I'm going to do with this simply is take and cut. I guess it works. Cut a piece. Okay. Like that. All right. Now, piping. This big, this big, this big, and most of these are found in the floral section of the craft stores. You can buy them at times in the fly tying shops, but you're going to pay a whole bunch for a little bit. I bought one of these. It was, I figured, 80 feet of piping, and it cost me $6. So if I'm making flies this length, that you can, without even doing the math, it'll make a heck of a lot of bugs. All right. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make the middle size one. So I'm going to take this piping, cut off a length, and then I'm just simply going to force this into the piping. Okay. Then I'm going to shorten this up just a little bit. Did was I just tied off the back end. So now I've got if you scrunch it up a little bit, you've got some remnants of the tail. I'm going to pull this tight. And with the white thread, no. Tie off the front. By the way, I was showing some of the gentlemen in the front here that one of my ones here is made with the same thing. If you hold this up to the light, you can see the light through it. I fished this quite a bit, and the foam that's inside it is all broken into pieces. But the piping that's on it still keeps it together. So even though this is a little bit fragile, once it's inside the foam or inside the piping, this stuff really keeps it together. All right, now after I've got this tied front and back, all right, I'm going to put a little bit of put it in there. Where did it go? Oh, there it is. Tighten up. A little bit of super glue. I have not used varnish for 40 years. I have not used head cement for at least 10. You know, I like the super glue. It does a good job. It keeps things together. Anybody remember my ant pattern?
Yeah.
I was tying what I thought was going to be a really nifty fly, and I was horsing around with that red mat stuff that I use for the ant. And in between the steps, I was using the super glue. When I got to the end of what I was doing, I decided I didn't like the fly and I wanted to pull it apart. Well, when I went to pull the red thing off the back of the red piece of the mat off, it broke. And when it broke, it showed the little antenna and so on the material. And I knew exactly what I was going to do with the next fly with the recent flies. So you never know how it's going to start. All right, so now you've got a minnow shape. All right, once this sets up, I'm going to cut it off close in the front, leave the back. Now, hooks. I scared poor Steven at the Orbis store with buying hooks. He said, "What are you tying?" I put a fairly heavy, big hook on these for one simple reason. It turns them. If you don't put a heavier hook on them or a bigger hook on them, when you put them on the water, they float flat, and you don't get the silhouette that you want. All right? Now, the hooks that I've got, if I hold it against this, can you see the eye on it? Is it good enough to see that? How about this? You can pretty much see what I've got on it. All right, it's a straight-eyed hook. Straight-eyed hook is really great because basically what you can do with it is you can find out where you want it here and where you need to put it inside between the piping and the foam. Get it inside that. And then you can just shove it forward. Well, I put that on tight. Now I've got my hook going. All right, now. And this. I found that the super glue doesn't like the foam on the mats very well. If you put the super glue on heavy, it melts it. Not good. So I've gone to another method. So what I'm going to do here is use a little bit of the RB stuff. Oh, this should have been in the microwave. Kind of gloppy. This is pretty neat stuff because you can, you know, once you flash it for like 5 seconds, it's there. And then if you hold it on another 15, 20 seconds, it's really there. You know, it's gonna do the job. All right, so basically I've got some minnow with a hook in it. Now what you do with it from there is really up to you. The one thing,
Did you poke the eye of that hook out below the little red collar you put on there? Is it coming out the bottom?
yeah, it's coming out the bottom.
Okay.
I found out something interesting with the doll eyes. Normally when you're using the resin, the UV stuff, you can't glue things onto another item, right? You put an eye on and the light won't go through the eye, so it stays liquid behind it. But the doll eyes, the plastic on them is so thin that the light goes right through it. So what you can do is you can put a little smear of the resin on, set the eye on it, and hit it with the light, and it's on, which is kind of a neat way of doing it. Saves a lot of horsing around. You do know the trick on this stuff when it gets to be gloppy like this. What do you do with it?
Put it in the microwave. you said.
Right, for about 10 seconds, and it's back fluid again. All right, I put the eye on the other side. But that light goes right through that thin plastic, and all of a sudden, guess what? Your eyes are on. I was looking at the eyes, and I had one on the desk, and I used the light, and I looked, and the light seemed to go right through it. And I said, whoa. No. Okay? Now, another one. Here, I'll go through some of these. It's a little bigger. We have a 100-acre bass pond at home that's got at least a foot of ice on top of it right now. And I've been managing it since 1974 as a trophy resource. So it's got some nice big bass in it, lots of good panfish. But before we started playing around with the panfish and the bass, I stocked it to the hilt with golden shiners. You gotta feed them first, right? And the golden shiners are a very, very prolific critter. I don't know where they fit into the scheme of you know, what kind of fish they are, but they're a soft-rayed fish. They multiply like crazy. So they really fill the pond up with food. And this is, you know, made to look like the golden shiners. So that one. Another one. Now, another thing you can do with them is, see the difference in this one? Anybody know what that lip is made out of?
Fingernail.
Fake fingernails. Buy them at Wally World. A whole pack of the ones like this is like $5. Buy them at the fancy cosmetic places, and you're going to pay $25. All right, and they come in variety of sizes. They even come with a little bottle of super glue. So these work really neat. What I do is I just simply trim one. I'll show you. I'll take one of them, and I know to just about do that scallop shape. See what I think black. You see what I did? And then when I do a bug, I do is I set this underneath and glue it in place. And then I put a little bit of the UV in front and back and on the lip to really strengthen it. But, you know, what is this now? What, if you were spin fishing, what is this? Huh?
The divers.
Starts with R.
Oh.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So, but it, you know, the wiggly ones work really well. And what I found is if you put the lip in front of them, what you can do is cast and put them in an area and let them sit. And then short strip them real quick with a straight line, your rod tip down, a straight line to the fly. Just short, quick strip. And what they do, they almost gain nothing in pulling it out of the sweet spot that you're in trying to catch a fish. They stay pretty much stationary, but they wiggle and they come back up. They do this and they come right back to the surface. And I've watched the bass a couple times on the pond, you can see them, and they were 10 feet away, at about the third wiggle, boom! You know, you see, boom, they got it. You know, it really attracts them. This is something that you can do that really makes a good bug. Now, there's another way of doing them, all right? This is starting to look like my tying bench. All right. This is also foam. This is window insulation. Right? If you go to Lowe's or Home Depot or any of them and look at insulation, there's a really nifty supply of different varieties and colors and so on of foam products. And they run $6, $7. And again, there's a length of them, and you only need a little bit. So basically on this one, what I would do is I would start out with the bigger one. Stick it in here. Okay, same thing. I put the lid back on the super glue. I holler at my kids in class if they leave it open 1 second and I do it. Now, what I found with this one that's really neat is I don't pull it. I learned to not pull it tight, but to leave it a little bit loose, and when it's up at the light, it gives you it looks a lot more lifelike than if you pull it tight over like if you'll see in some of these that I tied recently, you see how you can squish them, all right? They're not pulled real tight. My earlier ones are like, well, that's the same way, but I'm finding that later, you know, a later pull before you tie it off works well. It's kind of interesting to tie a fillet. You notice what I haven't used yet? The other thing is, what do you think that weighs? Nothing. I mean, realistically something, but it's very, very, very light. So even when you put a hook in it, you put a lip on it, it's still light. A fly this size will cast better than, let's say, a medium-sized popper. There's less wind resistance on this than the face of a small popper, medium popper, not a big one like I sometimes fish. So they cast well. The other thing is when they really work well on the water. They really do. And you can make them for little or nothing. The price of the materials is zero. All right, let's go in there. I know this is repetitious, but I want to show you the foam and the the meat tray thing. By the way, I not to try and sell stuff at Stevens' place, but these pike hooks, I think that's what they're still calling them. And they, they use pike, muskie, large bass. These things are incredible. And they're so sharp that if I'm tying with something where I'm really in here working, I put a little piece of rubber tubing on the point because the points are really sharp, okay? I'll do the same thing here, figure out about where I want it. This is a 4-aught hook. I didn't pull this one tight, so it's going to be a lot easier to slide it right up and out. That's all you need to do. So I hope that you know, get together with a buddy, a fellow tyer, buy materials, and when you're sick of making these things, give enough for the rest of the club to tie with, because you know they're so easy, and you can make them fancy. You can color them with markers. You can paint them. You can do all kinds of things with it. Basically, if you stabilize the hook in this, you got a minnow. You know what I
Are you
mean?
coloring them? Are you coloring the plastic outside or the foam inside?
The outside, and it works pretty well. Let me attach this foolish thing. What I normally do, I didn't take the time, is I will pre-wrap the hook shanks. They hold a lot better if you're gluing to the thread than if you're gluing to the metal, always.
Fishy, at the risk of being drummed out of the court,
Yeah.
have you ever considered dangling a treble hook off of that big 4-aught hook
No,
for those big bass you're talking about?
but I'll take your advice to heart.
Okay.
Put eyes on it. You were asking about markers.
Yeah.
Let me use something that's dark enough you can see.
You want to search for two? Yeah.
If you just go light on it, got black tables. Oh. But you see what you got? Can you see how it colored it? So oftentimes I'll make the top a dark blue or green. I'll paint gill covers on them, and I'll put eyes on them, and I mean, that's probably a little further than you really need to go. But I'm an art major; it's a curse. You can't not play with my paints and brushes. I mean, I just have to do it. All right. So now, let's see if I can do something on this thing here. Now, the real skinny stuff, all right? Is that the new camera?
I have no idea.
No, that's what we're using for it.
See if we can get this more over by you. Better or worse?
similar technique, no inner body, all right? Just that thin piping.
That's just empty piping from
Yeah, empty piping, with the lateral line now for the hook, okay? This stuff is called eyelash yarn. If you walk through the knitting yarn session, right? What you don't need to look at every bit of the aisle. What you look at is you go down until it's shiny. Okay, when it sparkles, that's your place to be, all right? So just walk down, and when you find the sparkly stuff, and it comes in, you know, I was at the Orbis store a couple of days ago getting hooks, and they had this stuff in little packages for $4.50 or $3.50 or something. A skein of this is probably a little more than that, but it's a little bigger. It's like 100 feet or something stupid like that, all right? My kitty cat loves this stuff. Little monster. I left a lot of room for a head, as I think that makes the fly look a little better. I'm using heavy enough thread that I can build it up very quick. There's a silly little fish that runs around in the Nolan River in the spring that some people go out there and chase. Anybody know what that fish is? Sandies? No. This is a really simple little sandy fly. The other thing is it's pretty much indestructible. It's not something you're going to fish. You know, if you're making a panfish fly, one of the priorities before you even pick up materials or consider it, no, two priorities: bite size. And the other thing is, you want it to be durable. You don't want to tie a panfish fly that falls apart after the second fish, because you're probably going to catch more panfish, right? Same thing with the sandies. If you may work your fanny off all day and not catch anything up there, or you might hit it the next day and have them be up to your neck in them, right? So if you really get into them, you don't want to be replacing flies every 2 minutes. And this thing is just about bulletproof, and it's simple to tie. You know, again, a little bit of the piping, a little bit of this. You can do all kinds of variations of it and so on, but basically it's just a little. I have found, after fishing for sandies for, I don't know, probably better part of 10 years now, that as long as it's white and sparkly, they don't really care beyond that. And I don't know how you folks have been finding out the same thing, or what you're fishing or whatever, but basically I got a whole box of all kinds of variations of sand bass flies. I mean, one of those ones you could put, you know, rows and rows and rows, and they're all different silhouettes, and some vary a little bit in size, but they're all white and sparkly, every one of them, because I really believe that works. What's everybody fishing? Is that what you're doing, or you got a better idea? Huh? Works out all right. So this is another way to use that real fine stuff. You know, it doesn't look like much, but it works. Anybody hear anything about the sand bass? Anything doing? It's cold weather, or warm weather, cold weather is probably making them crazy. And nobody hear anybody do anything yet? Well, we're gonna go beat them up anyhow, Carol. She's hollering, you're not taking me fishing. All right. Any questions?
That last one you tied, there's no weight on that except.
No.
for the rod.
Well, you know, if you want the weight, put a bead head in front of it, or put, or I wouldn't play around with lead wraps on the hook shank. It just isn't worth the time. You know, throw a bead in front of it. Whatever. Again, I would go bright red, or flashy metal, probably silver. I do that as well. And you can make it you know, the size of hook you want, the length you want. You can shorten it up. But you know, super glue works good.
Have you had any luck crappie fishing with either of those two patterns?
Yeah. Crappies are, they're a really strange thing in our pond. It took me a while to figure it out. Crappies are usually pretty vulnerable in the spring. Okay? Pretty early. Early crappie fishing is usually better. They're easier to find, right? I'm fishing and I'm doing okay, but I'm not catching what I should be catching. I'm not, in my opinion, right? So I started experimenting, and I've got, I don't know why, but I tied some pink panfish flies with sinkers, but, you know, with a bead head on them or something, but they were all tied with pink materials. They loved them. For the first month and a half of our season from ice out, which is August on, you know, they'll eat them. During the summer and the fall, they won't touch them. Now, you know, what sense does that make? But I find that, I don't know how it is down here with your crappie fishing, but if you're really into that kind of fisheries, I like crappie fillets. You know, I take the canoe paddle instead, you know, nice white canoe paddle, set it on across the gunnel and use it for cutting board and feed. We've got snapping turtles in our pond. The top of their shells is that wide. You know, they got heads on them like this, and they just love me because it's the only fish I kill in the pond is during the early spring. I will probably, with the trips out, I probably maybe kill a dozen crappies. Nice big female, which is even worse. But you know, they work well. And panfish, if it's bite-sized and it moves, you know, the bluegills, they don't care. I've got some tips and tricks on panfish. I found a couple of little tricks that, you know, they're not always easy to catch. You know, sometimes at the spring of the year when they're on the nest, it's just stupid because you know, anything goes near them, they hit it. And so the bass, unfortunately, do the same thing. In New York, you're not allowed to do that. I don't know about down here if that's acceptable or not, but in New York, if you're caught fishing over the beds, it's bad. Okay. Anything I can do again?
I have a question. I think you said at one point that you sometimes wrap the hooks before you put them in the...
Right. Just a layer of thread wraps. The reason for that is when you're gluing the two together with whatever you use, super glue or resin or whatever, it just adheres a lot better to the thread wraps than it does to the metal. If you take a popper body, you say you got a half dozen popper bodies, half a dozen hooks. You glue the popper bodies on with epoxy. After you thread wrap all the hooks, okay? You glue a popper body on with epoxy and let it dry for a week, so it's hard. After the week, you can go like this and turn it around the hook shape, okay? If you do the same thing with the super glue and let it dry thoroughly, you can turn it, but it turns harder. It's a better, it adheres better. If you do it, put the popper body on and the super glue, and then touch the super glue with the activator, the zip kicker, you'll break the popper body trying to turn it. It's the best way of putting things together if you don't get in trouble with the liquids eating up what you're making. You gotta make sure what you're tying doesn't react to the activator. But if you put things together with the activator, it's instant.
learned that from you a couple of years ago when you were doing this. I buy it by the gallon now.
Oh, my Lord.
I mean, I use it for a lot of applications, you know.
What's your name back there?
See? No, I use it for a lot of applications, even for making heads.
You know, I'll tell you the worst story about super glue. The worst thing that ever happened to me about super glue. It was like the first time I came to Texas, I was doing a fly tying demonstration at the shop in Fort Worth that was called the Blue Heron? Green Heron? Blue Heron?
Backwoods?
No, Green Heron, Blue Heron?
Blue heron.
Huh?
Blue heron.
Blue Heron Fly Shop. Long before, well, maybe Backwoods was still available, but anyhow, it was time. And I had brought the activator with me. I was doing poppers and showed them, you know, how it was better, right? So it's a product that I'm sure if you wanted it from Backwoods or Orvis or anybody, they may probably don't have it on the rack, but they've got it in their inventory from Wapsie or whoever they're dealing with, right? So you can get it, but you got to know what to ask for. So I had an empty bottle before it came out with the stupid spray can, which is a pain in the butt, right? I had an empty bottle that I passed around so my class would have an idea of what they were asking for if they decided to use this particular new product for time. So one of the guys in class, he said, Fishy, I got a question. I said, what's that? He said, where in the hell did you get this bottle? It had a gold stock sticker on it. Now that probably doesn't mean anything to most of you folks in here, but Gold Stocks is the fly shop in Schenectady, New York, which is a half an hour from where I live. And the crazy that knew about that grew up in Schenectady. His name was Mike Emerson. Any of you people know that character? Yeah. So unfortunately, that introduced us, and I haven't been able to put up with him, had to put up with him ever since. But that's the way I met Mike was, where'd you get this bottle, you know? But the other thing with super glue that's really nifty is when you're putting things together with it, if you put a popper body on a hook, put super glue on it, you've got a little bit of time before this dries. So you've got time to stick your vodka in the bottle of super glue, make sure that your position is perfect on the fly, and go zzz, and throw it in a Tupperware dish. Whoop, it's done. It's not gonna, while it's drying, it's not gonna flip or turn or go out of kilter. If you're doing, where you're putting things together quickly, when I tie streamers, I put all the cheeks and everything together, and I put a tiny, tiny bit of super glue on them, and once I get them held down in a perfect position, I touch them with a little tiny bit of the activator, and they're there. And I cover up the mess with the cheeks, with the juggle cloth.
Can you buy the activator anywhere other than the manufacturer?
Hobby Lobby has it.
Hobby Lobby, internet's full of it.
What do they call it?
Zip kicker.
It's called CA Activator.
Yes.
CA Glue Activator.
Yeah.
It comes in different brands.
Yeah, whoever puts it in the bottle calls
It's
something
got
different.
like you were saying, a sweetness smell to it. But
You're not sniffing that stuff,
It changes the way you tie. Because you do so many things with it. It's very versatile.
Yeah.
Your hobby town on 75 up there.
But it makes whatever you're putting together, it is the best way of attacking things that I have ever found. Both speed-wise, you know, the time it takes to work with it is almost instant. The only thing you've got to be careful of, you don't want to get the super glue or whatever on your finger when you touch the activator to it, because the activator reaches about 800 degrees when it goes off, and that would probably smart. Okay, I've done it a couple times, and it leaves a little ridge. It just takes that little piece of your hide out. It's gone. Okay, all right. Anything else on materials? What are you playing with? What have you seen that I play with that I can help you with? Something I've done in the magazines? Oh, I'll explain that later in the seminar, what I did like recently. Do you want me to go through one of these again or show you, or you think you got that down?
Miss, you might hold the hook package up to the camera.
Yeah. Can you see it? Sorta? Okay, they're high carbon, chemically sharpened, which means you gotta be careful, right? And they call them, they used to call them pike hooks, and now they just call them, 13 this or 13 KE. I guess they decided they didn't like the PI. But anyhow, their uses are pike, muskie, and large bass flies. But they're incredibly strong and sharp. I mean, the larger ones, you really can't bend them. You know, the only thing about them is, I bought these 3 packs of them a couple of days ago at Orbis, and it was $28. And there's 10 in the pack, so 10 or 30 hooks for $28. Figure your math. They're expensive, but why would you go through all the effort of doing this on a cheap hook? That's like making spending time building a fishing rod on a lousy blank, or building a good rifle on a lousy barrel. I mean, you start out with quality, or you end up, no matter what you do, you end up with crap. I mean, I like them because they're so good that if I'm going to spend an hour playing around with my paints and make something like this, when I'm done, I've got a hook that's probably a better quality than fly, and then some, All right, let me make another one just so you really got that down.
Yeah, I know better. We need to widen this out again.
What are you doing?
We're moving the camera back around.
Let me play with something a little different. When you cut them out with scissors, you don't get a real clean edge. Doesn't make any difference. Okay? I've cut them out with an X-Acto knife. I've sanded them and played with them. You don't need to. No reason to have to do that. See if I can get away with that size.
How thick was that foam you're using?
It's
Compared to like 2 millimeter that you use?
this.
Yeah,
It's a meat trace.
yeah.
Uh,
That's styrofoam, right?
huh? It's styrofoam, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Make a pumpkin seed out of it?
Here's.
Is that what you're doing? Sorry, hate to spoil your thunder, that's just what it looked like to me.
Did you say where you bought the casing, fishing?
Craft stores.
Okay.
Some of it is found along with the floral. And the other thing is, the Container Store used to have a variety in there where they had their wrapping stuff, right? And I don't know if they do anymore.
They do, especially at Christmas, a bunch.
Oh, Christmas is a marvelous time to
Yeah.
get 5 times supplies. Okay.
Sorry about that. Stole
Nobody
your-
likes that.
I stole your thunder.
I knew I never did like you, Neil.
No, it's all right.
I'm getting to like you.
You'll get over it. I bought enough prints for you to buy sucker, so you're in good shape.
Oh, that's good, that's good. All right. If you set these up as like a production line, like not maybe, I hate to say it, commercial tying or doing something like that, you can really turn these things out lickety split.
Like you said, it looks like they'd last forever.
They're tough. And they shouldn't be with the ones with the foam insides, in the body are indestructible. But the ones with the styrofoam are not. But they, like I said, that one that I've got here has caught at least a dozen good fish, and it's a little limp, but I'll throw it this summer, All right. Clear out here. All right, I'm using a 3/0. Oh, that's an interesting thing too. I do all the artwork for one of the fly tire columns, right? Got the artwork all done, got it all written, got the introduction into the fly all done. The only thing I have to do is the material list. So I sit down and go, where's the material list? Well, what's the first thing on the material list? Hooks. I've got 3 packs of hooks from 3 different manufacturers on my desk, and I set them on top of each other, and they're exactly the same size. Right? 2-aught, 3-aught, and 4-aught. They're all the same damn size. So I call Coswire, David, what the hell do I do? You gotta tell people what size hook to use. He says, put down something, a size appropriate for the fly. So that's what we did, something appropriate for the fly. But, you know, they had a bad time of trying to work out some kind of nomenclature on fly lines, because every manufacturer was calling them something different, and finally the people out in Cortland said, well, we got to standardize this thing so we know what we're doing, right? They need to do the same thing on hooks, because it's crazy. I have completely stopped looking at numbers on hook packs. I look at them and say, yep, that's how big I want it, because there is no rhyme or reason from and I don't mean it's slight. I mean, I've got, let's say, size 12 dry fly hooks from 3 different manufacturers. One of them looks like an 18, one looks like a 10. You know, there's just no, it's terrible. You try to tell somebody on the telephone what size hook to use for an ant pattern, and you got to tell them, you know, who makes it to get it the correct size. That's what I normally would do. Okay. Not geeky.
Okay, so I have to ask, so instead of forming the whole body and then sticking the hook through it, why is it that you don't close off the tail end and then stick the hook through the open cylinder and then both attach it to the fly and tie it in at the same time?
Probably because I've never tried it. It may work better than what I'm doing. I don't know.
Just curious.
I lost it.
Yeah. It did like a 2.
Oh.
He's not even using that expensive device.
What's he
Why
use?
spend money on the phone?
Yeah. I got some of that stuff.
Okay.
Do something.
I found some of that, I mean, oh, for sewing or something.
Quite a new one. Okay, without putting the eyes on it, You can make a, you know, what's one of the main food sources for the bass if they're available?
Rods,
Bluegills.
crawfish.
Bluegills. Crawfish or smallmouth
Sunfish.
favorite? Yeah. Bluegills. They'll eat anything they think they can put their mouth around. I caught a bass last summer on a fairly decent sized popper that was that long. He got nicked with the point of the hook, or he never would have known what, never even felt him. I really, what's this, you know? But he took a crack at it, but he was 2¼ times the length of the popper. But if you put, you know, little color, I don't know where my orange is, but I put some orange color on the belly as well, and then put a pair of eyes on it. But basically, very simply, you can make a silhouette that's a little more towards the panfish silhouette, because the bass really like them. They really do. Like I say, you could do the bass. This obviously, I used some background. You know, I know the golden shiners are in there. I know the bass are taking them, so I make golden shiners. This is a particular minnow that we've also got in the pot. It's got a dark back and a very prominent lateral line on it. And this one I just made up because it's really ugly. But, you know, find out what you've got in the pond or in the lake you're fishing. You know, what is the baits? What is the food supply? I had a bit of a conflict with one of the other outdoor writers in the Albany area for several years. We finally threw in the towel and became good friends, but we didn't start out very well. So we were both scheduled to do a program together at one of the local clubs, and they had a really nice pond. Well, Ken went out, was the first one on, and he blasted me. Some of it not too good about my fishing qualities and so on. So while I'm standing there on the side of the pond waiting to be introduced and take over his spot, I kept looking down and I see all these little dace minnows running around all along the edge of the pond. And I don't have any idea why. I looked and I had a perfect imitation, and one of the flies was stuck in my hat. I had a dace imitation. So I tied, we both had our rods in our hands. So I walk out and I already tied the dace pattern on the end of the line. I made a long cast and stripped about 3 times, and their stock rainbows were like this, and the one that I just hooked was in the air more than it was out of the water. And I reeled it in and I handed it to him and said, "Here, this is what they look like." First, now, would you make another cast? Would you try it again? You know, but you know, the idea is you know, try to match what's out there. You know, matching the hatch just isn't what you've got a specific mayfly on the water and you're trying to match it. That's fine, but sometimes you're in a fishing situation where the forage base is different. You know, it doesn't come out of the air and show itself. So, you know, pick up a couple rocks. You know, look around. You know, smallmouth love crayfish. I mean, they're baby lobsters. Everybody here not like lobster? You know, I mean, they're good. If they're available to them, they'll take them. They'll eat other things. But find out what's in your water. Search it. I mean, I know the pond very well. I know what's in it because I stocked half of the critters that are there. But the thing is it makes it really nice because in the spring of the year when there's lots of new young golden shiners out, this thing is just a killer. It works real well. So.
Are you fishing that on the surface, or is that in the water column?
This basically is surface. And I use the heavy hook to turn it, and what I do is I short strip it. I make it, you know, no matter how well you think you've got it keeled, right, everything lined up, it's not like Rapella has a great machine that lines everything up for them and they track very well. These sometimes don't. And I find that the ones that don't, when you strip them, they're erratic. and they have that better action, and those are the ones that are actually a little bit off as far as the, you know, everything lining up the body and the hook and everything, actually work pretty well. But I've just seen bass come out of the water for them. They love them. And it's year-round, I mean, within our season. From,
So how would you use that up at Lake Texoma on scrapers? Where you need to get it down?
I would probably put it down a little bit. I'd put something in front of it. I'd put bead chain, or, you know, the lead, you know, metal eyes in front of it, doubles. Or wrapping the hook chain with lead doesn't seem to really do an awful lot. You gotta get it down. And I prefer to have the head down so that when you pull it, the head comes up, and you release the tension, the head goes down, so you get that bouncy action in your retrieve. But stripers, I've caught a bunch of stripers on just about that size, and some good ones. If they're busted in the surface and they've got bait on the surface and they're busted, you probably don't have that kind of a situation with your inland stripers, do you? You don't see them. You see them school up and bust?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Sandy's too.
Yeah.
Okay, well, if you've got that situation, then, you know, that's probably, well, maybe not that one, but surely something like this is good enough with the lip, to get it, just to make it active. I would think that would be enough to do it. I fished some strange things in freshwater. I've also fished some strange things in saltwater. I made a pattern, I don't know if any of you remember, I did a pattern called bone fishy fly. It was tied with four lengths of bead chain and a hook and a little bit of fluff. And the idea was when I was fishing the flats, when I fished a fly and the fly hit the bottom, it would turn over, it would lay on its side. I wanted to stand up and look pretty, right? So I used the 4 links, not just for weight, but I used the 4 links of chain. It was like a little pedestal, so when I hit the bottom, it stood upright. And I made them, second round, I made them with the fingernail bodies, with the fake fingernails. So I'm somewhere in the Bahamas fishing with 2 of my friends, which is dangerous to begin with, but then they kept fishing fingernail flies, and I took a little heat. Well, that lasted for quite a while until I caught and released about the 5th or 6th bonefish, and they hadn't caught squat. And then the bonefishy flies got real pricey. So now, so the one is a very talented salmon fly tyer, you know, classic salmon, marvelous tyer. And he was at his show a couple years ago. He was sitting at his bench with all these beautiful things out in front of him, tying these idiotic things with the fingernails. He was going to the Bahamas in a week or 2. He was tying flies for the trip. So you know, sometimes it works, but I've caught some real nice double-digit bonefish on those, along with some other critters, you know, on the flats that are better eaten than the bonefish. So we keep a few. All right. I hope I helped you. Thanks for giving me some room to come back and help you. I appreciate it. But I have fun with my time, and when I teach my kids all summer, my first rule is it's supposed to be fun. You know, the gals, which group? Oh, probably with Mary Kay, with Kay and a bunch of them at the Fort Worth Club. You know, those girls are just brainwashed into the first thing. It's going to be fun. You know, they've learned a hell of a lot better than we have, as the fellas have. You know, when I hear people grumping and groaning and worrying about the politics and crap and fishing, I think, come on, guys, it's supposed to be fun. You know, don't ruin it. You know. So anyhow, thank you very much. Thank you.